Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, March the 13th, 2024. Today, aside from the astrology and the I Ching, I want to look at Princess Catherine. She has been in the news recently. I mean, she's been solidly in the news. There's been speculation about her health, why she was in hospital, having this abdominal surgery. And the latest problem has related to a photograph. So here is an article on NPR relating to the photograph issue. So this article is titled What to Know About the Confusion Over Kate Middleton's Edited Family Photo. So the family photo might have helped ease concerns and questions about Kate, but then viewers noted irregularities in the image and a flurry of new questions emerged. And now the princess has acknowledged that the photo she released on Sunday was manipulated. And she said, like many amateur photographers, I do occasionally experiment with editing, the princess said on social media. I wanted to express my apologies for any confusion the family photograph we shared yesterday caused. So go scroll down, there's the family photo, and I'm really not an expert, but I think that hand looks a bit out of place, does it? Not that I would have noticed if someone hadn't pointed it out. But anyway, that's the family photo she produced, and she's now admitted to editing it, and it's a bit of an embarrassment for her, and it sort of seems to be more of this sort of annus horribilis that she seems to be going through in 2024. So what I thought I would do is have another look at her horoscope. I have already looked at her horoscope in some detail, but I want to have another look at the chart, really try to find out, what is going on this year. Why are things so apparently bad, or are perhaps things getting better? So we'll be looking at her chart in detail. But before I do that, I want to do the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, March the 13th, 2024. So there we have the chart for today. As usual, set for noon on March the 13th, 2024, was rather, as usual, set for noon at New York, on for today's date, which is March the 13th, 2024. So the main thing going on is probably the moon moving into Taurus. The moon goes into Taurus very early this morning, London time, at 28 minutes past midnight. So that means that if you're in the Americas, moon is in Taurus all day. If you're in London, you have to wait 28 minutes. If you're in Western Europe, it would go into Taurus at 1:28 a.m. If you're in India, that would be 6:28, 7. I think that would be about 7:02. So you might have to wait until 7 o'clock in the morning. If you are in Australia, New Zealand, then the moon, Far East Asia, you'd have to be pretty far east, maybe Vladivostok. Then you'd have to perhaps wait until lunchtime or late morning for the moon to move into Taurus. But, whatever your time zone, we can regard the moon as being in Taurus, and we can consider some of the aspects the moon is making while it is in Taurus. So with the moon moving into Taurus, we have quite an important sign change. Moon moving from Aries to Taurus that is a big change. Moon in Aries can be quite impulsive, wants action, like now this minute. It's fiery. When you move into Taurus, it's slower. It's more solid and fixed. But the moon is exalted in Taurus. Yeah, it works very well in this sign. In many respects, things should work well for us. In terms of relationships, there will be a certain stability there. We can be grounding. If other people are upset about something, maybe we can bring them down to earth. And also it's what we respond to emotionally. With Moon in Taurus, we're responding emotionally to the world that we can touch. In terms of people, maybe touch is going to be important. It depends on the situation, though. I think overall that sign change from a moon from Aries to Taurus is favourable. But I don't want to say there's anything wrong with the moon in Aries. I mean, I've got moon in Aries, by the way. Yeah, well, actually, my moon in Aries it doesn't work too well, perhaps. But moon in Taurus it's a good place, all things being equal, for the moon to be. But we do have to consider some of the aspects the moon makes as it moves through early Taurus. So the first aspect the moon makes is a square to Pluto. So that moon-Pluto aspect could be somewhat intense and stubborn. We might really hold on to our feelings. We have strong feelings, and Moon in Taurus is a fixed sign. We don't want to let go of them. And once we get an opinion about something, we might want to hold on fast to it. Though it may sometimes be a bit difficult to let go of our feelings. Pluto can hide whatever it touches. So we might want to hide our feelings. But then there's always this contradiction with Pluto. Is Pluto about being afraid, or is it about being assertive? Pluto can be about power and wanting power, rather than being afraid of power. So it kind of depends on the situation. But I don't want to make too much of a big deal about Pluto. The moon having made that square to Pluto, it starts applying to a sextile of Saturn. There is Saturn in Pisces. Moon is moving towards this sextile of Saturn. Okay, this sextile is probably going to be more important if you're in America in Americas than the rest of the world. But I think we're still going to feel it because the Moon and Saturn are they're two signs apart. Moon in Taurus, Saturn in Pisces. So we're going to feel the moon moving towards this sextile to Saturn, and it creates a certain amount of stability. It helps us to sort of ground things even more. Moon in Taurus is quite grounded. Sextile Saturn, that really does allow us to ground things. So, if there have been recent complications, today would be a great time to ground them. And also, the moon is starting to make a conjunction to Jupiter. And that moon conjunct Jupiter is really quite fortunate, particularly in Taurus. It's not just stabilizing things in this boring Saturnine way. It's about looking for opportunities and looking for ways to be lucky. Yeah, we can be lucky today. Actually, overall, I think all things being equal, it's a luckier day than average. Having said that, there are a couple of midpoints that I do have to point out, and some of them could be problematic. Venus. So Venus is about 2 Pisces at the moment. That's nice. Venus is in the sign of its exaltation, but there's a problem. The problem is this. Venus, you can see, is about 10 degrees from Mars. It's just separating from a conjunction to Mars, very wide conjunction, 10 degrees away from this conjunction, and it's applying to a conjunction of Saturn, and it's about 10 degrees away, this applying Venus-Saturn conjunction. In other words, Venus is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And, Mars-Saturn as a pair are quite difficult. They can be associated with negativity. They can be associated with delay, things not going as fast as we'd like them to go. And in extreme situations, they can be associated with death. I don't want to really make too much of that. And so with Venus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, remembering that Venus can be about relationships, certain people can be a real downer. Certain people can really destroy the atmosphere with their negativity. Even if we don't see the negativity on the face of it, we may, deep down, it's going to influence the vibes. And also we have to listen to what people are saying and what people are expressing. Some people may actually be thinking about death. Just people we meet, what we talk about. So there could be a somberness there, and in certain situations, almost a sense of tragedy. But we're on the cusp of tragedy. I'm not saying we are on the cusp of tragedy. It's just how it all occurs to us. So that's Venus conjunct the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Also, Mercury there's Mercury. It's conjunct the Mars-Uranus midpoint. You see, there's Mars and Uranus in square, actually. So it's Mars and Uranus are in square. You've got Mercury conjunct that midpoint. I actually think that conjunction could be quite dangerous, not necessarily in a personal sense, although, as always, avoid taking risks, don't do anything stupid, don't do anything dangerous, don't play around with guns and chemicals, but it may say something about the world. Mars-Uranus is about explosions, it's about war, it's about machines causing destruction. So be careful with machines. Be careful about trying to work out machines. So yes, I think that Mercury on the Mars-Uranus midpoint could be dangerous. Also be careful. Be careful how you communicate. You might communicate in a way which causes, or rather, we might communicate in a way that is quite disruptive. And it does, perhaps in certain circumstances, does more harm than good. And a final way of looking at what's going on today is to look at the heliocentric picture, which I'm starting to do now. I think it is important to quickly look at the heliocentric chart every day. So this is the horoscope today's planetary positions from a perspective of the sun. When you put the sun in the center of the universe, the center of the solar system, where it should be from a scientific perspective. And so, there's no ascendant, there's no moon, because the moon is exactly exactly in the same place as the Earth from the sun's perspective. And so there is no sun in this chart. There is an Earth in this chart, and this is the heliocentric position. Now, one of the interesting things about heliocentric astrology is that Mercury and Venus move quickly. Mercury takes 88 days to move around the sun. So Mercury compared to yesterday has moved 6 degrees. I mean, normally we don't expect Mercury to move much faster than 2 degrees a day, but heliocentrically, It can move up. It can move 6 degrees a day. I don't know, probably even faster than that. So there are now 2 conjunctions forming. So yesterday I talked about this Venus-Mars-Pluto conjunction forming here, which is now starting to break up. We've got Mars on the Venus-Pluto midpoint. So Mars on a heliocentric Venus-Pluto midpoint as part of a wider conjunction that is quite intense. People responding to that intensity maybe quite violently. Now, I think when we're talking about heliocentric charts, it's very impersonal. So when we look at a heliocentric chart, it's more likely to be impacting the world at large impersonally rather than us as individuals. I'm not saying it can't impact us as individuals, but it's more about global things. So Mars on the Venus-Pluto midpoint, yeah, might be intense if we look at it from a personal point of view about relationships and so forth. But why not look at it from a global perspective? Maybe it's about diplomacy, how people are trying to force their way through diplomatically, and how diplomats are behaving, trying to have negotiations, treaties, perhaps not being very successful at it. One group of people trying to assert themselves at the expense of another group of people. Then we have got this Jupiter-Uranus-Mercury conjunction. In fact, today there is a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction from a heliocentric perspective. And I know you're thinking that the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is not quite yet, but that's maybe because you're looking at it from a geocentric perspective. From a heliocentric perspective, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is today. Ebertin says about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that it is the thank the Lord aspect. So maybe some of us might be feeling a sense of relief that we are able suddenly to get over something that's been bugging us, some kind of issue. Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, relief. Particularly as Mercury is conjunct that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and that Mercury-Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is trine the Earth. Unfortunately, it may not work like that. Jupiter-Uranus, from a heliocentric perspective, is quite violent. And that Earth trine Jupiter-Uranus, triggered by Mercury as well, may be more of the same as in terms of what was happening yesterday. So yesterday I was warning perhaps that there was a breaking point somewhere on Earth. Something had to give. And I repeat that for today. It's more of the same. So I do think that from a heliocentric perspective, things look tense overall. The Earth, and particularly the humans on the planet, are doing strange things, and something they're involved in just might give. Where is that weak point? Perhaps some trouble spot somewhere on Earth, could be. But that's a heliocentric position, and a reminder that a Sun-Neptune conjunction is the same as an Earth-Neptune opposition. So the Sun is in Pisces, it's moving towards a conjunction of Neptune from a geocentric point of view. From a heliocentric point of view, we can see the same aspect expressed in a different way, and that's why we can see the Earth at 23 Virgo applying to an opposition of Neptune at 27 Pisces. So we have this Earth-Neptune opposition forming, and this does indicate that we are confused down here on planet Earth. Things are breaking apart, structures are breaking apart. We don't know what's going on. Perhaps we're being blinded by fake news and propaganda. Particularly as Mars is conjunct the Venus-Pluto midpoint. People are messing with our minds. Governments are messing with their minds. Governments think they can control the agenda, they can control the news flow. Can they? Sometimes. But sometimes not. So that is the heliocentric position of the planets. And now let's just return to of a normal chart. Okay, so what I want to do now is look at the astrology for the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for today, for the 12 signs, for Wednesday, March the 13th, 2024. Aries. In many respects, Aries, it is a quieter day. You're not quite so impulsive as you were perhaps yesterday or the day before. You're looking for a certain amount of stability, and I think you're thinking a little bit about the future and security in the future. And as a result, you may have to turn your attention to money and material things. I mean, you don't really want to do it. It's all rather boring, but it might be worth your while. You can, and in the process, I think that you should be able to create a certain amount of stability for yourself. Though there may be a time during a day when you find yourself being unusually possessive. Now, that's not something that the average Aries is ever proud of, being possessive. If you're an Aries, if you're a typical Aries, then you're not really a very materialistic person. You're not someone that really likes to go on and on about what's owed to you or what belongs to you, what should belong to you. But today, I think you can feel a certain element of that, and you may be asking questions about who's paying for what, whether you're paying too much, whether you're being treated unfairly from a financial perspective. The moon is square Pluto, and I think that might encourage you to have those kinds of feelings. And I understand you're not necessarily proud of having those feelings, but I don't think it's anything really to be ashamed of. Aries, you do have to look after yourself. That's fine, and that's certainly something you might want to do. But it's not it's not entirely negative. I mean, the moon is starting to move towards a sextile aspect to Saturn, or even a conjunction to Jupiter. So if you keep with it in terms of money and possessions, you may actually be lucky. There could be a certain amount of luck. Things might go your way that you weren't expecting. Though, with the moon moving to a conjunction of Jupiter, there may come a point in a day where you start to feel generous, as if you feel you might want to let go of some of your money. So that's an exaggeration, some of your money. But, a bit of material generosity on your part, even if it's a very small amount of generosity. I don't know, giving, if someone's on the street asking for money, and giving them a few dollars or a few pounds or a few euros or whatever, or a euro or something. I don't know, whatever. It might make you feel good. Obviously, don't go over the top with generosity. Yes, there is some small danger that Arians might be over generous, particularly towards the end of the day, particularly if you're in the Americas, moon conjunct Jupiter. You might think, oh, you can afford to be extra generous. Well, don't just do it in an impulsive way. Aries, impulsive, generous. No, I just, do sort of think it through. But giving away a small amount of money, as I said, something like a couple of dollars, pounds, euros, might actually not just make you feel good, but it might actually attract some good luck. So that's one thing to say about what's going on today, and it's possibly not what you want to hear, because I do understand that a lot of Aries find money rather a boring topic. Then we have to consider other people So in terms of other people, you have recently noticed a change in some of the people closest to you. They have become more emotional, more sensitive. I think that they've also felt them to be more present, to be less detached, and overall, I think that is a good thing. But you have to bear in mind that some people have a weird negativity to them. It's like perhaps they're focused on themselves. They are having dark thoughts. They're thinking the worst. So you have to decide what you do about that situation. Do you hear them out? Do you try to engage with their negativity? Or do you just take the view that actually this is not something you want to engage with? You've got your own life to lead. The last thing you need is someone just trying to bring everyone around them down. So you have to consider that. So be a little careful in terms of the company you keep. Some people could spoil the day. Taurus, the moon is moving through your sign. Okay, if you're in Australia, New Zealand, Far East Asia, if you happen to be in Vladivostok, for example, then the moon won't move into Taurus, your sign, until late morning, sort of lunchtime. But overall, Taurus, I think we can say that the moon is moving through your sign. And that is good news. The moon works very well in Taurus. When the moon is moving through Taurus, you're feeling very present. You're there. You can touch the world around you. You feel that you do feel tethered to the ground, and the world responds well to you because you're there, because you're present. And we shouldn't forget that the moon in Taurus it's exalted in Taurus. Your emotions are in accord with the world around you, and in terms of other people, in most cases, you should be getting positive feedback. The only problem today might relate to Venus, which is your ruler. Venus, it's nice, it's in Pisces. There has been this change. Venus is exalted in Pisces, so two planets connected with you, the moon, is in your sign. It's exalted. Venus, your ruler, is in Pisces. It's exalted. So, what is there to complain about? In fact, the moon is sextile Venus, which really makes things really, really good. Oh, and better still, Venus now Venus is in Pisces. It's in mutual reception with Jupiter. So Venus is in Pisces, which is Jupiter's sign. Jupiter is in Taurus, which is Venus's in sign. Mutual reception. Things are looking great. But problem is that today Venus is conjunct the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And so there is some danger that your own negativity and your own misgivings spoil things. Not just for yourself, but the world around you. You might be just preoccupied on things that are just overly negative. the things that could go wrong, the things that appear to be going wrong, being preoccupied with issues of death and destruction, maybe watching the news and being overly influenced by what you're hearing on the news. What's happening on the other side of the world, yeah, sure, you can engage with it, but it shouldn't overwhelm you. Yes, I do understand there are lots of distressing things going on, and but there's always distressing things going on. Perhaps, in fact, not perhaps, there are distressing things going on all the time which perhaps you're not aware of, because they're not at the top of the news flow, but they're still there. And so if you see something on the news that really upsets you, well, sure, compassion is important, but don't let it overwhelm you. Don't think that everything is collapsing. Okay, look, the world isn't great, but that's the way it is. But don't carry it on your shoulders. Don't inflict it. Don't inflict it on other people. Sure, talk about it, but be rational and have a little bit of objectivity there. So overall, Taurus, I think there is this problem that your negativity, passing negativity, which is, I think, rather tends to be really subjective, being preoccupied on the negative aspects of life, thinking about death, destruction, hopelessness, all these kind of Taurean thoughts. As I think I said yesterday, Shakespeare was a Taurus, and Shakespeare was incapable of being very negative. What was that thing in Macbeth? The road to dusty death, and we have the sound and the fury, but ultimately it signifies nothing. So yes, we could get into that kind of Shakespearean negativity. It might feel very dramatic, but I would not recommend it, because you do have to deal with the rest of the world, and also things are looking good, as I've just said. Not just for yourself, but everyone who comes into touch with you. You can really make people feel good, so you can have a great time, you can be lucky, you can stabilize things, you can have good contacts with your friends, and really, Taurus, it's up to you, but just don't spoil it. Gemini. Some Geminis are perhaps feeling that they don't actually need to be too engaged with the outside world. You might feel that you've essentially done your bit, and that's it. You can just do your own thing. And I think there is some justification for this approach, because in many respects you are going to be most fortunate when you have a sense of separation from the world around you, when you're not having to engage with other people and their problems. I think it's something you sort of have to work on in your own way. Also, I think you're quite inspired, and you just feel this sense of warmth that doesn't need any explanation. It doesn't need anything going on in the outside world to support this warmth. That fuel comes from yourself. So don't feel too pressurized to engage. But I think some engagement is nonetheless necessary. After all, there is a sextile aspect between the Moon and Venus today. And that indicates to me that you've got something to contribute, that the world needs to see you on stage for a little bit, because I think you've got something to say. It's not that you have to be dramatic, but you have to be there and perhaps have a moment of leadership, a leadership that comes from yourself. You have a feeling for what people should be doing, and perhaps you need to express that. So a 5-minute appearance might be all it takes. Also, the moon is starting to move towards a conjunction of Jupiter. Okay, that's perhaps more of something if you're more of an issue if you're in the Americas, but still the moon and Jupiter are in the same sign in Taurus. So from a Gemini perspective, Jupiter does have an impact on relationships, because Jupiter rules Sagittarius, your opposite sign. So with a moon conjunct Jupiter, you can quietly and slowly get closer to someone, for whatever reason, depends on the situation. But, you can get closer to someone, not in a dramatic way. It's just a sort of in an inevitable and natural process. And you and this other person have got maybe work to do, or it may just be about companionship and togetherness. That may be part of it. Now, from a more sort of negative perspective, you do have to be careful what you say, because you can say things which cause a fair amount of damage and upset. You know how to excite people. And your hasty communications could sort of, make everyone sit up and listen, but perhaps sitting up and listening for the wrong reasons. Maybe you've just exaggerated something. You just want to, you want to perhaps be dramatic. But remember, Gemini, it's not a day for having a dramatic impact on the world around you. That's not what you should be trying to do. But still, I think I'd go further and suggest that you might be a little bit accident prone. If you're doing anything dangerous, Gemini, it could go wrong. Especially if you're working with machines or even driving, or cycling or something like that. You might just find yourself, without meaning to, just being a little bit impulsive, taking a risk that you shouldn't be taking. I mean, I suppose we shouldn't forget that Mercury, your ruler, is in Aries. Aries is quite a headstrong, impulsive sign. And so you might sort of rush into something that quickly gets out of control. So do consider that, Gemini. I'm not saying anything bad is going to happen, but I think you should just watch out and sort of err on the side of caution. Cancer. The moon is your ruler, so if we want to work out what's happening in the Cancerian horoscope, we should really focus very hard on the moon. And the moon is changing signs. The moon is moving into Taurus. Well, if you're in the Americas, or indeed Western Europe, the moon is going to be in Taurus all day long. If you're East Asia, Australasia, then the moon is not going to move into Taurus until late morning, lunchtime. So to an extent, it depends on your time zone. But for most people, the moon is going to be in Taurus pretty much all day long. And so the moon works extremely well in Taurus. And so Cancer, I think you are going to overall benefit from this sign change. Though there may be at the beginning a time when you start to take yourself too seriously, and that could spoil things. You might decide, perhaps at an emotional level, that you're dealing with serious stuff that can't be discussed. That you need a bit of distance to work it through. That just engaging with other people, with the world at large, just that's not something you can do, because you've got to work it all through on your own. Now, I think that approach should at best be only fleeting. Sure, have those feelings, but don't dwell on them. Because really that would be a waste. Don't dwell. Try to move on. Sure, understand the seriousness of the world in which you're living, but also understand, the benefits of being where you are and the benefits of being who you're with. Because today you have marked social skills. People are going to find you reassuring. You're not the kind of person that's going to break your promises or let anyone down. You're just going to be there for everyone. Now, that's not to say that you're a martyr. I'm not suggesting you have to be a martyr. I'm just talking about the impression you're going to give, that you are going to be there for everyone. And I think actually you'll quite want to be there for everyone. I think that stability and reliability will be important for Cancerians today. And I think your friends and your associates are going to think that you're really great, and you have a chance to follow through on things that you may have been discussing or working on over the last perhaps week. It might something in the recent past might have just been pure speculation, just promises, just an idea. And today, and probably tomorrow as well, you can take action to bring this thing down to earth and make it real. And in the process, you will get a feeling that you are actually addressing your hopes for the future. If you have hopes for the future, it's no good just having hopes for the future, because hopes for the future will, of course, stay as hope. But today you can take these hopes and bring these hopes down to earth and turn them into something real and concrete. And you can do that with other people's help. And when it comes to relationships, I think there are good grounds for being optimistic. After all, the moon is your ruler. It's making a sextile aspect to Saturn. Saturn in the Cancerian chart does have a special connection with other people, because Saturn is ruler of Capricorn, your opposite sign. So with that moon sextile Saturn, you really can strengthen your relationships, make them more stable. If you've been in a relationship where recently there have been problems, sort of arguments, incompatibilities, I think that these can be resolved. And it's not a situation where you should be thinking about blame, who is right, who is wrong, though it may be, if anything, this is if anything, I'm not saying this is the case. If anything, it may have been your fault to some extent, because with that moon sextile Saturn, there is an indication that another person can help calm you down, can help stabilize you. So that may have referred to your previous behavior. Maybe recently you did something impulsive or something you regret, and that might have caused a problem in a relationship, maybe. But this moon sextile Saturn, I think, really helps bring things down to earth. And we shouldn't forget also that the moon is conjunct Jupiter. Moon, your ruler, conjunct Jupiter, the planet of luck. Jupiter is very well positioned at the moment because it's in mutual reception with Venus. Jupiter and Venus in Pisces, they're in each other's signs. And so I'm thinking that your connections with other people today should really work very well. Leo. Today, Leo, you are quite focused and you are quite ambitious. There are things that you want to do. You feel that now is the right time to be doing them, and I think you'd be correct on that score. You have definite ambitions, and you might have thought about them in the past. You might have thought about different possibilities, but now, Leo, you've made up your mind by and large, and you want to get going on it. You want to get going on everything, and I think this is something you definitely can do. You've got a sense of stability. You're not so your resources are not as scattered as they used to be. That scattering is resolving itself, and you're now thinking about that one thing that you really want. The kind of thing you want that requires a little bit of engagement with society, and you're ready for that kind of engagement. Having said that, not everyone is going to be supportive. I mean, we can't ever expect everyone to be supportive. And I think today you may find that there is one particular person or organization that seems to be holding you up or seems to be providing resistance. For your part, don't take it too seriously. Just consider what you want, and don't be worried about the fact that you're not being fully supported. It happens. We can never be fully supported. Besides, for every person, for every organization that is trying to hold you back, there is another person that wants you to succeed and be successful. There is at least one person who can be really useful. That person is possibly symbolized by Venus in Pisces, because the moon is moving through Taurus, or starting to move into Taurus if you're in East Asia or Australasia. The moon is moving into Taurus, and it is sextile Venus, and so perhaps that Venus represents someone who you maybe don't normally have much to do with, who you might have almost forgotten about. But actually, Leo, this person could be extremely useful if you give them a chance. So if you find that things are not going quite as fast as you'd like them to go, or if you feel that you're being blocked, I don't think you actually will feel you're blocked, but if you do find that you're being blocked, I think you can get help. There's someone out there who can be, I think, very supportive. Virgo. It is time, Virgo, to perhaps look beyond yourself. I think you have a clear sense of who you are and what your limitations are. Perhaps you're actually overly focused on what your limitations are. I mean, of course, it's always good to be realistic, to understand, all the things that, could be holding you back. But you don't want to take it too far. It's good to know what's holding you back. And that knowledge, that knowledge is useful, and it helps you deal with future challenges. But Virgo, you really have to kind of look a bit beyond your sort of everyday world, because you've got to think about the future. You've got to think about what is going to happen in the future, and you've got to plan for the future. And planning for the future does require a certain amount of imagination. Imagination really does matter. And you might be thinking, well, imagination, that might be about about fantasy. Why do we need fantasy? Well, it's not really about fantasy, because actually, Virgo, you have to understand that the future is all around you. If you want to know what's going to happen next, it's there. It's right in front of you. People know what's going to happen next, even if they don't know what's going to happen next. You just have to observe their behavior. Look at the world around you. The future is written all over it. And it's kind of like, I think it was H.G. Wells. Didn't he write The Time Machine? I think he wrote a book about the archaeology of the future, that you can actually see the fragments of the future all around you. And so by looking at the fragments of the future, you can look on and see what's going to happen next. And that's something, Virgo, that I really do think you can do, because you notice these things. You are quite a details person. And details are not just boring things that have no meaning. These little fragments, you can see the big picture. And Virgo, that is really what you need to concentrate on. But I suppose I have to point out that Mercury, your ruler, is conjunct the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and that could cause a few problems. Mars-Uranus as a pair can be quite disruptive. They can be about technological disruption, things just not working out, problems with machinery, anger, and with Mercury conjunct the Mars-Uranus midpoint, in certain situations you could be hasty. You could do things too quickly. And as I said to Gemini, because Gemini is the ruler of Gemini is Mercury. So like you've got Mercury as your ruler. As I said to Gemini, be careful with machines. Just don't mess around with machinery. I mean, it might look good, might look as if it can do the job quickly, but maybe not. As soon as you plug it in, disaster might strike. So don't play with machinery unless you really know what you're doing. And if it can go wrong, it perhaps will go wrong. So be careful on that score. So you don't want to spoil it by one moment of carelessness. And also be careful driving, and be careful what you say. Mercury is not just your ruler, it's also the planet of communication. So with Mercury on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, you might say something that comes from who knows where. It comes, I don't know, the depths of your unconscious. It just pops out, and then you have to deal with the consequences. But really, Virgo, I don't want to be negative about today. I think it can be a really good day, and I think you need to take advantage of all the resources that are available to you, particularly the human resources. I mean, remember, Venus has just gone into Pisces, your opposite sign. So, Venus works really well in Pisces. So there's someone out there who's well placed. So in terms of relationships, it may be a partner, someone you're working with all the time. They have a change. They have had a change. They're in a more fortunate position. They still have a few worries and concerns which they might want to discuss with you. But once you've got over these worries and concerns, then I think you'll find that there are a couple of people, certainly one person, who can really help you make the most of everything that's on the table. Libra, you might actually find today that you have a passing negativity. I understand, Libra, that you overall you try to be positive. You don't want to get too deeply into sort of heavy emotional issues. You never do. I mean, Libra is a sign that likes to skim on the surface. Okay, not always, but all things being equal, that's a Libran thing. Let's keep everyone happy. Let's not get into dangerous areas. The main thing is keeping the balance, having a certain sense of stability. But today, Libra, you can see what might be wrong. And you might then take the view that things are difficult. But not really. That shouldn't be how you see it. It just means that you can see something. You can see the world for what it is. And just don't take that as a burden. It's just plain awareness, and you just have to you have to accept that not everything is roses, and that's the way it is. So don't let other people's problems, the world's problems, get you down, because really there's nothing much in the short term that you can do about it, and you have your own life. You have your own life to lead, and your emotions. They could be a friend, they could be a foe. As I've just suggested, your emotions could be a foe. Your emotions could bring you down, but your emotions could also be your greatest resource. Today, Libra, you are very sensitive, and I mean that in a positive sense. You're aware of other people's issues, other people's problems. It's good that you're aware, provided you don't allow other people to project all their garbage onto you. You need a bit of distance there. And although I said at the beginning that Librans, they like to skim the surface, don't want to go too deep. But today, actually, you shouldn't be too afraid of going deep, getting involved in things. If something interests you, or if you think something is important, then don't be afraid of really trying to get to grips with it. It might seem complicated at times. You might feel as if you're out of your depth, but somewhere in there's something very important. It's almost perhaps that you're looking for treasure. Of course, looking for treasure, you shouldn't be taking risks looking for treasure. I mean, you don't want to sort of jump into quicksand looking for treasure at the bottom of the quicksand, because there is no bottom and you might never emerge. But perhaps we're talking about, just complicated complicated matters, not just emotionally complicated, but maybe financially complicated, things that other people don't want to deal with. But if you're prepared to really get involved, then I think you can. I think you can benefit from a situation, and indeed, other people may be able to benefit from the situation. But don't overthink the matter. Yeah, you mustn't be reckless, but you mustn't be too nervous about it. There are some things which, on the surface, might not be very nice, but which, nonetheless, can bring very real benefits, and all of this may feed into relationships. Relationships today could be important. Remember that the moon is sextile Venus. Venus is your ruler. So with moon sextile Venus, that indicates to me that you and another person can get very close, and it doesn't need to be a verbal closeness. It's just an awareness that you and someone else have the same interests, not just interests. That's a bit too surface. It's more about the same values, and on an emotional level, you might be on the same wavelength. So that's something to explore. So it's a complicated day, Libra, but I don't mean complicated in a bad sense. It's complicated in the sense of living in a complex world that is also a world that can be enriching and rewarding. Scorpio, you probably realize that you can't do everything on your own. I mean, sure, you're a very talented and resourceful person, but you don't have to be a solo warrior all the time. I suppose it sometimes feels like that with Scorpio, because you might just feel you're the only person that understands. You're the only person that's got the emotional and mental resources to get to grips with things. But, that is kind of unreasonable. You are ultimately a social animal. I mean, we're all social animals, and Scorpios perhaps have to be reminded that they are social animals. And you are going to have to engage. Or rather, it would be best if you were to engage, because I think you're going to be luckiest when you're with people, when you've got people around who you can communicate with, talk with them, and also be inspired by them. You can't be inspired all the time on your own. That inspiration very often needs to come from elsewhere. And I think that, there are certainly certain people who are inspiring if you allow them to be inspiring. And there are people who are there for you if you ask. Of course, if you don't ask, you don't get. I don't know about don't ask, don't want, but you just have to ask. And if you ask, I think you'll get an answer. So that's kind of the overall picture. It is about understanding it's about understanding your social environment and accepting that you're not in full control, and you don't have to be in full control. There's no point in being in full control. you do need, because you need to consider what you're applying yourself to. You have to think, where is your energy going, and ultimately your energy is going into a social environment, as an environment that is filled with human beings just like you, with the same unique sense of importance just like you. And one of the aspects happening today is the moon is sextile Venus. That's a very fortunate aspect. The moon is in Taurus, your opposite sign, and it's sextile Venus, the ruler of Taurus. Further evidence that you and other people have useful work to do. And in the process, consider the possibility that you might actually be able to enjoy yourself. But enjoying yourself may require not just you to have a change of attitude, but also someone else to have a change of attitude. Because if you spend a lot of time with one person, you might realize that one person actually has a somewhat strange view of the world. This person is well placed. Things seem to be going well for them, but they still seem to have this fundamental negativity, and you might be tempted to think it's your negativity, but in fact it's someone else's negativity being projected onto you. And this is a situation where I think you can do something about it. Yeah, it's tempting if someone's negative or is not exactly on your wavelength to just give up on them. But I think in this situation, you're in a position to dissolve someone else's negativity and to show them that actually things are looking pretty good. And so that is a way in which you can make the world a better place, or at least your small part of the world a better place. Sagittarius. You may have felt yesterday that things were changing a bit, that things were getting, I won't say more complicated, but more serious, that in some respects the fun was starting to come to an end, and you now had to deal with the responsibilities that were left. So Sagittarius, you may be uncharacteristically responsible today. You may accept that the buck really does stop with you. And if you take that approach, then you're being responsible and you're making sure that things don't get out of hand. And so if you see something starting to go wrong, starting to become a bit chaotic, then you won't take the standard approach of saying, well, whose fault is that? Instead, you'll just say, well, you're on the spot. You're the person there who can deal with the thing. Maybe someone else's fault, maybe your fault, maybe no one else's fault, but it doesn't matter because you are in a position to fix the problem. Okay, some problems you shouldn't fix. For example, problems that are, I don't know, the power goes off, you're not an electrician, well maybe you are an electrician, but you're trying to do something that is beyond your skills, which is dangerous. That is not something I'm advocating, but sort of more general, everyday, non-safety critical problems. You are in a position to start to sort them out. You may not get any thanks, at least in the short term. I think you will get thanks longer term, But yeah, if you're able to sort it out, then you should sort it out, and you shouldn't be resentful about it. But really, there's no need to be resentful. I mean, Venus has just gone into Pisces, and Pisces is a sign that is ruled by Jupiter, and of course, Jupiter is in Taurus. I think Jupiter's been in Taurus since last May, and Jupiter is in a sign that is ruled by Venus. So, in other words, there's a Venus-Jupiter mutual reception, which benefits you greatly. This Venus-Jupiter mutual reception, which is actually going to be around for quite a few weeks, is going to really allow you to create real stability for yourself. And I think part of that stability is knowing who to trust. Some people can be trusted. Some people are completely unreliable flakes. But today you can or not just today, but over the next few weeks, you can distinguish between the two. And so today, with the moon making a sextile to Venus, and in fact the moon is also making a conjunction to Jupiter, especially if you're in the Americas, you can start to tell the difference. You can tell the people who can help you in the future, who can stabilize things for you in the future, give you security. And you can also tell the people who are just up to no good, going to waste time. You just know. You don't actually have to think about it. I mean, you're a Sagittarius. You do not have to spend ages and ages thinking about it. You're intuitive. You have an intuitive sense of the way things are. And yes, there are a couple of people today who really must be avoided. Or maybe it's just one person. There's one person who is really attracting trouble. They're not particularly stable. They've got lots of ideas, but they might sort of act first, think later, get involved in things which are over their head. If there's such a person, then stay out of their way. You don't need the aggravation. Though maybe such a person doesn't exist, but I suppose as an astrologer, my job is to sort of tell you about all the possibilities, even if some of those possibilities don't seem relevant. But Sagittarius, I think if you avoid the wrong people, then I think I'm pretty optimistic about what's happening in the short term. Capricorn, you can trust yourself today. You can trust yourself to make things work. And also, you can trust yourself to actually enjoy yourself. I mean, I know that one doesn't normally associate Capricorns with enjoying themselves. Of course, Capricorns enjoy themselves as much as anyone else, but of course, from a textbook perspective, Capricorns are supposed to be this sort of somber person, particularly at the beginning of their lives. Although it's often said that Capricorns are like vintage wine; they get better. It gets better as they grow older, and Capricorns, as they grow older, become younger. That's something that's said about Capricorns. But today, you can enjoy yourself. You don't have to feel guilty about enjoying yourself. There are things to do. There are things to do which can harness your creativity, because you are creative. In many respects, you are the most creative sign. And now I know Capricorn isn't normally associated with creativity specifically, but the reason Capricorns are creative is because they are persistent. I mean, a lot of people, they are creative, they have bursts of creativity, but it all comes to nothing. It doesn't mean anything. But, if Capricorns are creative, they're able to see it through. And I think that is something you can do, especially now when the moon is moving into Taurus. I mean, from a Capricorn perspective, Taurus is a sign that's 120 degrees apart. It's a fellow Earth sign. The Earth signs, of course, are Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo. And with the moon moving into Taurus, your creativity is on great form. Though at the beginning of the day, you might have a moment of doubt. You might be wondering, is this the right thing to do? You might be concerned about the consequences of just letting go and being yourself, and you might think, no, you can't do it. But I think it's just something temporary. And once you make the decision, things can really start to happen. And I think you'll be very good at explaining what you're doing and why you're doing it. I mean, after all, the moon moving through Taurus is making a sextile aspect to Venus. You can explain yourself extremely well, and the things you say are going to make a lot of sense. I should also say that moon sextile Venus may be useful in terms of the wider world and how you interact with the wider world. I think you'll naturally be able to communicate with people in authority, and if you yourself are in the position of authority, the top of the pyramid, then you're going to be able to naturally communicate with the people below you. Just natural communication. You won't really have to think about it very much. And there may be one thing you have to sort out. It depends on the situation. But it may be someone, perhaps at work, or perhaps someone you deal with as you go through the world, as you go through having to interact with different organizations and so forth. Someone's got a misapprehension, and this misapprehension is making them somewhat negative. And it seems that you can, if you want, you can listen to this misapprehension and really try to understand the negativity and untangle it, because it's like some people, there's just a knot of negativity, and you, the Capricorn, you are the perfect person to untangle this knot. Finally, as far as relationships are concerned, one-to-one relationships, things are good, because the moon is making a sextile aspect to Saturn. Saturn's your ruler. Moon is the ruler of Cancer, your opposite sign. With the moon sextile Saturn, there's someone, or perhaps several people, who you can communicate extremely well with, and you can, through your words, tie them into your world, bring them into your world, but not in a sense of restricting them or being a control freak, just allowing someone to be part of your world and then just seeing what happens after that. Aquarius. I think Aquarius, you are quite down to earth today. You regard it as being important to keep it simple. You don't want excessive complications, though there may be times when you are a bit too precious about your own space. Yeah, I understand, Aquarius, that you are, you have a certain sense of detachment. You You value your space. You don't like people interfering with your life. But you don't want to be too defensive. And I think there may be a time today, a very brief time, where you are overly defensive. And if you're overly defensive, there's some danger that might put people off. It's not that you have to find yourself by erecting barbed wire fences. That's not what you have to do. You can find yourself by just being in one place and just relaxing in that one place. You don't have to be overly defended. Okay, I don't know where you live. Maybe it's appropriate to be living surrounded by razor wire. I don't know. I understand that people listen to me from many different parts of the world, not just the US and the UK. So that does to an extent depend on the situation, but just today you can naturally bring things down to earth without having to be overly defensive. And I also think that you can do useful work in terms of the financial side of things. I understand that security is important and financial security is important also, but with the moon making a favorable aspect to Saturn. Remember, Saturn is your ruler, and Saturn is in Pisces, which, from an Aquarian perspective, Pisces is quite a finance-orientated sign. With the moon sextile Saturn, I think there is work you can definitely do in terms of making yourself feel a lot more secure financially. Okay, you might not see the results immediately, but I think you can start a useful process off. Starting a process off. I think you were starting to think about it yesterday, but there's something you feel that needs to be done, and it may not just be about you. You may feel that ideally you need some cooperation. Okay, you don't really want to involve other people in your plans at the moment, right now, because I think you are quite introspective. But I think if you're honest with yourself, there is a scheme or that you feel you want to get going on, and this is not just a solo scheme. You are going to want to engage other people. So that's something you might want to think about. That might be something you want to work on. There are people out there who are sympathetic to what you're trying to achieve. So perhaps you should be trying to engage their support. Pisces, you are able to give a very good account of yourself. You're able to put yourself in the best possible light when you are explaining yourself. So, Pisces, if you are, going to an interview today, then I would guess that you'll do very well. And it's because, Pisces, through your words, you can get people to trust you. You're just going to seem trustworthy. Now, I'm not saying all Pisceans are trustworthy all the time. In fact, some Pisceans can be very untrustworthy. They can even be notoriously untrustworthy. What do they talk about? Slippery Pisces. But that's not the point. You can get people to believe that you are trustworthy. Hopefully you are trustworthy genuinely. But perhaps it's the impressions that count. You give the impression of not being someone who's going to rock the boat, not someone who's going to cause chaos and disaster. You're going to be a safe pair of hands, and so do make the most of that. if you're now in a position where you can get people to trust you, then you could argue that the more people that can interact with you, the better, because you're giving people a sense of who you are and what you can do, and the fact that, of course, you're trustworthy, and so you can make yourself make friends today, and people may feel today that they can really get to know you and get to know that you're the right person. So do take advantage of that, but don't be tempted to take advantage of other people, which maybe a few Pisceans might be tempted to do. Still, Pisces, there's no doubt that you're in a good position. Venus moved into your sign recently, yesterday, day before. Venus in Pisces. Venus is exalted in Pisces, and it's better for that because Venus Pisces is Jupiter's sign, and Jupiter is in, Pisces is in a sign ruled by Jupiter. Sorry, let me say it again. Venus is in a sign ruled by Jupiter because Venus is in Pisces, and Jupiter is in Taurus. So Jupiter is in a sign ruled by Venus. So Venus and Jupiter are in mutual reception. They're in each other's signs, and of course Jupiter is your ruler. So Jupiter is doubly strong, really. Pisces is doubly strong. So I do think, Pisces, that really things are looking good for you. And, that's another reason why you have to tell people how wonderful you are. And you won't even appear to be boasting. You can boast without boasting. I don't know how that's done, but Pisceans are clever at that kind of thing, being able to sort of manipulate people into getting a particular impression. So I think you'll know how that works. You'll know what to do. Having said all that, not everyone is good for you. There are some people who could cause a bit of upset. I think you'll know who they are a mile off. People who are very impulsive, people who use strong language, maybe, people who make claims to have particular abilities, but you have your doubts, and people who are just plain accident prone. So those kind of people should be avoided. And if you're in a relationship, particularly a close relationship, like a marriage, or if what's the phrase? I came across it recently. If you are partnered, that's a wonderful word, isn't it? Partnered. It's because one moves beyond marriage, and it's just sort of this general collective word for being in a relationship, in a sort of, I don't know, domestic relationship, perhaps just partnered. But the other person that you're close to, they may be accident prone, and of course if you're with them all the time, you can't really, it's going to be difficult to stay out of their way, but you can do your best to make sure they don't do anything dangerous. Perhaps you can warn them, and perhaps encourage them not to drive or to operate dangerous machinery. So yeah, that is something to consider, and it would be a shame if one person's accident proneness were to spoil the day. But I think that is a situation you have control over. So if you see there is someone indispensable who is on the verge of taking a risk, then I think Pisces, you are able to draw them back. Okay, that's the day from the perspective of astrology for the 12 signs. And I'm now going to transition to the I Ching. So, as usual, I ask the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 64, before completion. There are 64 hexagrams in the I Ching, and this is the last. And before completion represents us getting close to the end of whatever we're trying to achieve. It may be like a fox trying to cross a river, and it's getting close to the other side of the bank, getting close to its goal, but it's not quite there. And if it's not quite there, things can still go wrong. I don't know, you could end up like, Steve McQueen in The Great Escape. You almost get over the wire, but not quite. So it's before completion. So do not be complacent. You might feel you're close, but you're not entirely close. You haven't made it all the way. So you don't want to end up like Steve McQueen. What was him? He was kind of trying to escape the Germans and on his motorbike, and he was running across the border of Switzerland. He just had to get across the wire, and he tried to get across the wire, but he couldn't make it, and he got all tangled up in the barbed wire, and the Germans captured him and took him back to the prisoner of war camp. So you don't want to end up like Steve McQueen. So you're close, but you haven't got there. You're not there quite yet. So don't be complacent. Now there are two moving lines. Fifth line moves, and the top line. The top line move. The top two lines move. Fifth line moving is generally fortunate in the I Ching. When the fifth line moves, it's a good line to be moving. And so fifth line moving indicates that there is actually success. You're careful, you make it. And there is this great sense of relief, happiness that you've done it. But then the sixth line moves. The sixth line doesn't contradict that. You're still comfortable that you've done it, but there is a danger that having achieved something, you celebrate too much. You let your guard down. So in a way, just because you've crossed to the other side doesn't necessarily mean you've entirely made it. You don't want to be complacent. The I Ching gives the image of someone perhaps getting drunk. We've done it, let's get drunk. No. Just because you've done it doesn't mean you're out of the woods. That if you're complacent, you could actually lose what you've achieved and perhaps go backwards. And this hexagram before completion moves, and it moves to hexagram number 47, burdened. I use burdened because Greg Winkup in his translation translates this as burdened. The Wilhelm translation, I think, translates this as oppressed. So the symbolism of this I Ching is top three lines are a lake, bottom three lines the abyss, potentially water running out of a lake, turning dry. It just can't hold. Not being able to hold the happiness. That would be the issue here. So I've talked about potentially succeeding at something, being happy about it. But the lake is about happiness. It's about joy. But you've got the abyss. You could lose that happiness. very easily. And I think the issue here is, having achieved something, we are certainly burdened. But I've gone for burdened rather than opposition, because I think burdened, it doesn't quite have the negativity of the Wilhelm translation. It's the idea that yes, we are burdened, but that doesn't mean to say that we're dealing with a disaster. It's like we've accomplished something, and having accomplished something, we have taken on an extra burden and extra responsibility, and through this burden, we might not enjoy it, but we're actually getting stronger because of it, because we understand all the problems, but through a responsible approach, we're able to carry it through. So that's what the day is really about. It's about being successful. In the end, okay, we cannot be complacent, but being successful, we have to accept our responsibilities. And it's tough, but we're doing the right thing. And so overall, I would have thought these hexagrams are quite positive, but they're not easy. And we just have to accept the responsibilities that have been placed upon us. Okay, so finally, I want to consider the chart of Princess Catherine. I've looked at her chart before, but I don't think that I've looked at her chart in great detail. So to go back to her chart, thinking about her chart, actually, she has got quite a difficult chart. So here's her horoscope. We shouldn't forget that Princess Catherine was born on an eclipse of the moon. You can tell that she was born on the eclipse because there's her moon in Cancer, conjunct the North Node. Sun in Capricorn conjunct the South Node. In other words, she was born on the full moon, but because the full moon was conjunct the nodes, we know that by definition it was an eclipse. And being born on a full moon is tough. And in a female horoscope, you could say that the moon is more important than the sun, particularly once a woman hits adulthood. The sun is perhaps the past, what she should be trying to move away from, and we can see this with this North Node conjunct the moon, South Node conjunct the sun. So North Node conjunct the moon in Cancer. This is quite a sensitive person, but is having to deal with responsibility. South Node in the 6th house in Capricorn. And what happens? She goes and marries the heir to the throne, or the third in line. Now he's directly in line to the throne. That was a South. You could argue that was a real South Node thing to do. It was perhaps the easy option, believe it or not. But in marrying Prince William, she's created a lot of pressure for herself by having to get into that Capricorn, having to remain in this Capricorn. And I think that I do feel sorry for that moon in Cancer in the 12th. And it's been said that she had this abdominal surgery. And in astrology, I believe, the stomach is ruled by Cancer. By the way, I must emphasize the sign cancer in astrology has nothing to do with cancer, the disease. I must make that absolutely clear. And she has. I read somewhere that she's had stomach problems all her life. And the stomach is such a is so connected with what's going on in one's life. One has stomach issues when one is nervous or under pressure. You hear about people getting ulcers because they're under pressure and so forth. And so the pressure of this life, of the life she's leading, must be really putting her stomach under a lot of, must be causing a lot of problems for her. I would have said, and matters are not helped by the fact that there's her Uranus. Her Uranus is at 3 degrees 8 Sagittarius. In other words, Uranus is making a sesquiquadrate to the moon, and it's making a semi-square making a wide semi-square to the sun. I regard the semi-squares and sesquiquadrates as a really important aspect. And so Uranus sesquiquadrate the moon is someone who is someone who's quite nervous. There's a tension there. It's not about having a wonderfully harmonious life. It's about disruption. And further, if you look at her midpoints, she is going to have it's not exactly there, but her Uranus is going to be relatively close to her Sun Moon midpoint. You see, there's her Uranus. Her Uranus is at 1808 plays. Her Uranus is within less than a degree of her Sun Moon midpoint. So she's got Uranus on the Sun Moon midpoint. Or rather, Uranus is semi-square her Sun Moon midpoint. So Uranus semi-square Sun Moon midpoint should be someone who is a bit of a rebel, someone who stands out, who likes to do things differently. And one wonders whether her position in the royal family has allowed her to really able to be everything she should have been. I think that I'm concerned about what she did. I think you could argue that she's almost made a mistake by getting involved in the royal family. That's something she did. That, I suppose, that was her destiny, but it's not entirely in accordance with her chart. And I think it may be putting this extra pressure on her. And then look at the Sun-Moon opposition. There's the Sun-Moon opposition, and it's square Saturn. So she's got a T-square. Saturn square the Moon, Saturn square the Sun, which emphasizes what I was saying. It's a really very difficult chart, and from a sort of psychological causation perspective, whatever is wrong with her when she's with her sickness, I think it may just be the cumulative stress of what she's done to herself by getting involved in the royal family, and plus you've got all this. Heard sort of one person commenting on what I was saying that she's been victim of bullying. I don't know. You've got the. I mean, a lot of pressure from the public now, but she's had all the issues with Meghan and Harry, so she's under a huge amount of pressure. And of course, the stomach is where that pressure often manifests. I'm not saying that it's in her. I don't know what's wrong with her. I did nonetheless. I asked a horary question. Where I simply asked, this is me asking a question, and I just took the positions of the planets when I asked it, and I'll sit in my own locality. I just, I think, what's up with, what did I ask? My question was, what's going on with Princess Catherine? That's all I did. That's just what I asked. What is going on with Princess Catherine? I'm not saying I come up with anything particularly useful, but as it happened, I asked this question last Saturday, just before a new moon, and you can see that the moon, as perhaps a universal significator of women, is moving towards a conjunction of the sun, and this seems to indicate the increasing pressure that she's under. And look, the moon is in the 6th house. It is about health. Moon is going to a conjunction of the sun. We also see the Venus is about to change sign, so maybe Venus is another potential significator of women about to change sign. But I think the moon is the ruler of the 10th. I mean, the 10th house is kind of connected with royalty. So moon going to a conjunction of sun. I didn't really want to go really into this chart in great depth, not least because the South Node is in the 1st house, and when you've got a Horary with the South Node in the 1st house, that suggests there's no credit to the astrologer. So I'm not going to try too hard. To me, it damages my reputation. If the South Node is about bad reputation, it's in the 1st house. I'm the person asking the Horary, so I'm not really going to go into too many details or any more detail about this Horary. But I think the symbolism I get from that. The moon is conjunct the sun, and that is the moon. I think is Catherine. The pressure is likely to be whatever it is. It's likely to continue, and I'm not going to speculate further than that. So that's, and I've looked at Catherine's chart, and then there's a question like, what is happening now? And I started off with her solar return. So this is her solar return for her birthday for 2024. The chart for the moment the sun returned to where it was at the beginning of the year. One thing I find interesting about this chart is the position of the sun. The sun is square the nodes, and going back to this, actually this aligns with the Horary. The Horary I asked had 8 Libra rising and had South Node at 15 Libra, and her solar return for 2024 has the same. Actually, my Horary actually has a very close ascendant to that, and so she's got the South Node in the 1st house and in her return. And the South Node is about a bad reputation. Her reputation, I think, is being undermined this year, and of course, this thing about her changing a photograph really hasn't helped, has it? People are asking why. I read someone say, well, Harry and Meghan would never have made that kind of mistake. And so it maybe influences the power equation. I mean, it's ridiculous to think of a power equation. But there's her solar return. Chiron in the 7th, you might be interested in that. But the sun is square the nodes. Now you're thinking, well, why does it matter that the sun is square the nodes? Well, she has got the sun conjunct the South Node in her natal chart. So we've got a sun-South Node thing, a sun-South Node connection has repeated itself here. And so it may be an issue about her own destiny and the consequences of her own destiny. Plus, in her return, we've got Mercury square Neptune, we've got the moon sort of square Neptune. But I do think, this will come up again, this sun square the node. So I think there are a few problems in the solar return chart, but I wouldn't want to exaggerate them. And I wanted to focus on not just on her illness, but on this issue over the weekend with us doctoring the photo. Now, the press have made a big deal about it. I mean, it seems a very simple thing. Why would, a lot of people, they have Photoshop and stuff and they doctor photos, but I suppose she put this photo out as an official photograph, and not an official photograph, but she pushed it out on Mother's Day, and everyone immediately noticed it was a fake. Why did she make that kind of mistake? I mean, if she had doctored the photo, she should have said beforehand, not afterwards. And I know that she's into photography and she likes doing that kind of thing, but still, that does seem to be a serious mistake. So I've looked at the solar return today, but I also wanted to look at the lunar return. So this is the lunar return just prior to her putting out this photograph. So her lunar return, remember the moon returns every month. So this is a lunar return. February 20th, 2024, when the moon returns to where it was when she was born. By the way, I always do my lunar and solar returns. I always use a place of birth. I don't use the location of where someone is. In this case, London and Reading are close enough to not make any real difference with the charts. My argument for using the place of birth is simply traditional. I think it was Gadbury in the 17th century when he talked about various horoscopes of and returns of monarchs. I think Charles I. He always used the place of birth. So I'm following that tradition, and I'm not using the location of birth. Though in this case, it doesn't really make much difference because Reading and London are not too far apart. So this is her lunar return. There is her moon in Cancer in the 12th house. But what is interesting about this lunar return is the position of the nodes. There is a north and south node, and there's Cancer. There's the moon square the north and south node. Now, just remember, in the solar return, we had the same thing, except with the sun. The sun was square her nodal axis. And then then we see the same signature in the lunar return. Now that suggests to me it's an important signature, and remembering she has got the moon and the sun conjunct the nodal axis in her natal chart. So I'm thinking that this lunar return is further evidence that she's actually having to deal with the consequences of the choices she has made. And they do seem to be quite serious consequences, at least from a psychological perspective. Maybe at some level, she unconsciously, with this photograph, sort of changing his photograph, she knew what she was doing. Unconsciously, she knew it was going to cause a furore. I mean, why would she have done it otherwise? It's obvious. I mean, she's quite media savvy. She changes a photograph and puts it out. She must, at some level, have known how people were going to respond. I don't know why. Remember, she's got Uranus on the Sun-Moon midpoint. Uranus wants to cause disruption, and something is trying to get out. I think that might be what is going on with Kate. Then I wanted to consider what was actually happening on Mother's Day. I don't know what time she produced this chart. I've no idea what time I don't know what time of day she published this photograph. But here's a chart. I've just gone for noon on Sunday in London, and I want to just compare this chart with her chart. So what was happening to her on Sunday when she produced this chart? So we got Catherine's chart in the middle. We will notice there was a new moon. There was a new moon on that day, on that weekend. That new moon was just building up. That moon was precisely where was the exact position of that moon? 2017 Pisces. That was where it was. That new moon is exactly semi-square her midheaven. Kate's natal midheaven, assuming Catherine's natal midheaven, assuming she was born at 7 p.m, was at 5:18 Taurus. This new moon was exactly semi-square her midheaven. So the midheaven is about how we present ourselves in society, how we move forward in society, and can be about the job, the way we're perceived. And so that new moon making a semi-square to her midheaven was causing an upset because it was semi-square. Semi-square is a difficult aspect. So that's the first point to make about this. Second point is, again, assuming she has, she really was born at 7 p.m, that's the exact chart. That means she has 20 degrees 0 minutes Leo rising. So on that weekend, Mars was at 1954 at the beginning of the weekend, middle of a weekend. Mars was at 1954 Aquarius. So Mars was at 20 degrees Aquarius. So Mars was exactly opposition her ascendant on her enemies. And Mars was not just conjunct her descendant, it was also square Uranus. So she had Mars, Uranus square her ascendant. Uranus was conjunct her Chiron. I mean, she in her natal chart does have Chiron square her ascendant, Chiron in the 10th house. I think that if you're into Chiron, you might have it to say it might be about the pain and the wound of being a public figure. And so Uranus exactly square the ascendant, Mars exactly opposition the ascendant on the descendant, and she does that. I mean, putting out that photo, she's asking for trouble there. Now, that suggests to me that she's not in close contact with an astrologer. I mean, if she'd been into astrology, she would not have made that kind of mistake. But then I suppose you would have needed an astrologer who was really micromanaging it all. I know that her mother-in-law was supposed to have consulted astrologers. There were several astrologers who were open about having had Diana as clients. Though I should say, it's if you are an astrologer to a famous person or anyone, it's not just the contents of a consultation that should be where confidentiality applies. It's also to the fact that the consultation happened in the first place. So really, if you're consulted by famous people, the world should never know that you've been consulted by famous people, because the existence of the consultation should be kept secret, as well as the contents of the consultation. Anyway, there's a problem there. You can see why it was such an issue, these photos, because new moon was semi-square her midheaven, and also Mars was on her descendant, and it was picking up on the Uranus square her descendant. So I think that the reaction to that photo, and I know she's come clean about it, but I think it's actually quite devastating for her. I think it's a really big deal. I doubt that it's helping her recovery process. Now, I want to look at a couple of other things. I wanted to look at her solar arc directions. This is when you move everything by 1 degree. For every 1 degree, 1 year of life equals you move all the planets 1 degree. So her solar arc directions. These are her solar arc directions set for, well, I've set them for March the 11th, but they move slow enough. It doesn't really matter whether it's March 11th or March the 10th. So just see if it's hitting anything there. It kind of is, because what you've got here is solar arc. She's got Saturn. She's in her natal chart. In her natal chart's in the middle. Remember, she's got the Sun and the Moon opposition, and there's Saturn on the T. So basically, we move this this by 42. We move this 42 degrees because she's 42 years old approximately. So if we move that Saturn 42 degrees from 21 Libra, that moves forward to 4 Sagittarius. So that means that Saturn has just crossed her Uranus, and then there's her solar arc directed moon node square Saturn. So that midpoint of the moon and node is hitting her moon. So the moon node and the sun node midpoint is hitting her moon, and I think so. Which her moon is where it's all about. It's that moon getting pressure, and the sun moon conjunct the node in her chart is what she should be doing and what she shouldn't be doing, and it's all about, I think, right now, her. I think at a psychological and even spiritual level, as her having to deal with the consequences of a decision she made to marry William and get involved in the royal family. So that's something I want to say about her solar arc directions. Finally, I want to look at her secondaries, her secondary progressions. So secondary progressions are when you move... you don't move everything by the same degree. You look at the positions of the planets 42 years after she was born. So these are her secondary progressions. So these are the positions of the planets on February the 20th, 1982. And that would be 42. That was around 42 days after she was born. And so what we do is we look at the positions of the planets. Now, one thing to notice is, if you look at her natal chart, you see she's got a Mars-Saturn conjunction. But it's a very wide Mars-Saturn conjunction. It's sort of 11 degrees. It can be a difficult Mars-Saturn conjunction. It can be very frustrating, really tough. But we need to find some way of expressing that Mars-Saturn. And then we move to her secondary progressions. And that Mars-Saturn is getting closer. It really is getting closer. It's building up. So that Mars-Saturn that she was born with is getting stronger and more intense. She needs to find an outlet. And then we compare the secondary progression chart with her natal chart. And there is her progressed Mars, there is her progressed Saturn. You can see that what happened after she was born is that so Saturn, let me just have a look, go back to where, look at her, hold on. Okay, Saturn hasn't really moved much. So Saturn doesn't move a lot. So you can see that Saturn was not, she was born just before Saturn went retrograde. And so going back to the secondary progression chart. So it's gone so it's going back to where it was when she was born, but it's Mars that interests me. Her progressed Mars is at 1911 Libra. So when she was born, it was at 1028 Libra. It's now at 1911 Libra, and her sun is at 1912 Capricorn. Her moon is at 1842 Cancer. So her progressed Mars is now hitting her sun. It's hitting her moon. It's starting to move towards her sun. So that progressed Mars is causing further aggravation. And again, it's hitting her moon. So I'm not saying I know what the issue is precisely medically with her stomach, or whatever she had abdominal surgery for. But symbolically, it's all about her moon in Cancer. Again, I absolutely must emphasize the sign Cancer has nothing to do with the disease Cancer. But it's all about that moon in Cancer. That's the real Kate. And I don't think she's able to fully express that moon in Cancer. So that moon in Cancer is expressing itself in all sorts of other ways. And it doesn't look as if it's always particularly healthy. Plus the fact that she's got Uranus on the Sun Moon midpoint. I think that this, I don't know about this marriage. I mean, obviously she's married and that's the way it was. This is her destiny. But I think just looking at these charts overall and what's going on now, I think her marriage to William is now having an incredible cost. And I think that's fundamentally what it is. And the reason it's having an incredible cost is because it's in some ways not allowing her chart to develop its full potential. Not full potential, but it's about that moon. That moon really is the real Kate, the real Catherine. And I'm just concerned. Even we talk about, she starts off as Kate. That's something quite informal. Then she's Catherine, Princess of Wales, all that formality of Capricorn, 6th house. It's like a straitjacket, isn't it? And I think that is a lot about what is wrong with Kate. And I think that with this photograph, I think at an unconscious level, it was deliberate. Unconscious level. She knew unconsciously what was going to happen, and that's why she did it. She's not stupid. She understands the way it works. But I don't know. The unconscious is a strange thing. It works in strange ways. That's all I'm going to say about Princess Catherine. I think she needs to make some big changes in her life. I think something is wrong. I'm not saying it's physically wrong, but I think psychologically and spiritually, I think something is badly wrong and she needs to sort it out. So that's it. Thank you. Thanks very much for listening. If you enjoyed this video, I would be grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed and you enjoyed it, I'd be grateful if you were to like it and to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. Thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.